When looking at aesthetic medicine, and the purpose behind aesthetic medicine, apart from I want to call it rectification, right?
Mm,
So if we have a scar, we're trying to rectify and bring it back to what was once normacy. For
mm.
those who step into this world for beauty, um, as a doctor, Dr. Reza, how do you then begin to define beauty if everything is to an extent looking for perfection, yet human beings aren't perfect to begin with?
So all of those things are important to keep in mind and to get your patients to understand it. And this is why aesthetic medicine is something that should only be performed by medical practitioners who have taken the oath, the Hippocratic oath to do no harm, because the non-medical injectors that inject illegally tend to make people look terrible. They have the highest rate of side effects. And this is because they are not trained properly and they don't have the same care for the well-being of the patient. It's all about, I guess, making a quick buck off a growing
Sure.
industry. And so that's something that we're fighting against actively, more actively now in the coming months. But I'll get to that later if we have some time. But,
Yes.
it's about looking after the patient, and long term, that's better for everybody. It's better for our practice, it's better for the patients, and everyone who walks out of here is basically a walking billboard, if you think about it. And so
Mm.
it's our duty and our responsibility to make sure that they look happy, healthy, and like themselves. Everybody's got a baseline of beauty, something that makes them them. And we really don't like when people do cookie cutter things and make people look the same. Everyone who walks out of your room shouldn't look like they've been through a stamp, through a mill, bang, 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 and now they're coming out looking the same. It's really not a good idea. And, you'll find uh, people lose their uniqueness, and you'll find that it's more and more becoming visible and evident to people in the public when somebody's had too much treatment. And it really just seems like they're trying too hard and it's off-putting. So we advise that people don't go that route and don't overdo the aesthetics.
Mm. Let's talk about the perfect balance, right? Because body dysmorphia is a thing.
Mm,
And though it might not be as present and as protruding as a scar, these are internal scars where people are consistently judging parts of their body. How do you then, as the practitioner behind the rectification process, begin to navigate self harm, which is me trying to fix myself to this place of perfection, which I can't?
mm.
Versus me looking to enhance, to edify, if you will, for the purposes of beauty.
We have basic rules and guidelines that we give our patients. So if you started at the beginning, at the core of our practice, we follow the rules of art meets science, which means we take the products and we use them in a way that produces art. We then follow something called timeless elegance. It's another trademark, actually, phrase of ours. And it's like if you look at the house we work in, it's an old style classic mansion, and it was beautiful 100 years ago. It'll be beautiful in 100 years from now. And that's the thing we want people to understand. It's not about fashion when it comes to your face. Don't follow the Russian lip or the fox eye, or that's things you can achieve with makeup. You shouldn't be injecting yourself in that way and taking risks for that purpose. So what we want people to do is also to touch the mirror. I always tell patients, touch the mirror with your arm and with your fully outstretched arm. That's basically 2 arms length away from the reflection. And that's life distance. Most of the people in your life will never get closer than that. If they do, they're in your personal space already. I like to joke, but it's true. By the time someone gets that close, they've already made up their mind about what they want from you. They already know that they like you. So we don't need to seek perfection to the point where you put the mirror up against your face and you say, Doc, I've got a line that I can see when I come this close or when I make this face. And often the answer is don't make that face and stay far from the mirror. The things you see that bug you from arm's distance are the things we would be happy to work with. And, when you do things slowly and take a nice measured approach, you stop the patients from running away from themselves, getting carried away with treatments. And that's something that we do quite actively is to say, listen, let's today work on your toxins. Next time we'll do your fillers. Then we'll work on skin conditioning, and it's often enough to get people to focus and not to, I guess, overdo the treatments. But when it comes to someone who's got true body dysmorphia, it's our job again to recognize that this patient is going through more than the average patient. It's not just seeking something that they saw on TikTok, and it's for us to refer them to a psychiatrist or psychologist as appropriate. Often that comes with negative feedback. It upsets patients, and sometimes they do crazy things like they'll go and write negative reviews or try to complain about you. And eventually they do realize that what you were doing was for their own good, especially if they go for the help and they get the treatment and the help that they need. And then part of that healing process is for them to realize that you were never trying to offend them. You were just trying to look out for their best interest.
Sure. I think what's really interesting about uh, parts of the conversation that I've been hearing that are talk of the town is the effects of Botox. So I don't know to what extent Botox can affect your mood, your actual mood. I know that the emotional state of one's being can be affected. I mean, it to an extent changes what you look like. But I read up and I saw some commentary about people questioning moods, on experience and how these treatments can actually affect the human being. How does Botox affect me as your patient?
So when I talk about it, I'll call it botulinum toxin because medical practitioners are not allowed to use the brand names. But basically,
Mhm.
what happens is there's two ways that botulinum toxin will actually improve your mood or enhance your mood. The first way is through the mirror effect. When you look into a mirror, your brain knows that that is your reflection. And if it sees that you're looking angry or tired or sad, it will feel tired, angry, sad, especially combined with somebody saying to you, "Hey, why do you look so tired or angry or sad?" There's nothing that'll make you angrier, sadder, and tired or more tired. And so when you take that away and you are tired or angry, for example, and you look in the mirror and you don't have the signs that your brain knows are the signs of tiredness, anger, or sadness, or other negative emotions, you will then feel a reduction in those emotions. And so your mood will be elevated by that effect. The second, less understood version is the chemical action of botulinum toxin on mood. So it has been shown to enhance and increase mood, so you feel better through an unknown mechanism. But patients do feel better if I take it and inject it in your leg or your arm. Just having it in your body increases your mood. So its effects are largely positive.
Okay. And I mean, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but we have to talk about the negative effects. Perhaps let's screen through those as well.
There are no negative effects except negative side effects of treatment. For example, if it spreads onto your eyelid and you get a droopy eyelid, which is something that can happen and something that we can use eye drops and tablets to treat. If you were to inject it into a muscle that it shouldn't be injected into, for example, the muscles that affect your smile. I had a patient today who said that she was in Greece and she wouldn't go back there for her toxins because when they injected her neck, they actually went too deep and hit some of these bigger muscles, the sternocleidomastoid. So she couldn't actually lift her head up for the few months. Now, these are things that are easily avoidable if you are a trained medical professional. But the risk is never zero. I say to my patients, everything I do is to minimize risk, to take it as close to
Mhm.
zero as possible. And just like perfection, you can never reach it. You can never get to a zero risk. So it's something that patients must take into account when they're having the treatments, is that it is, a set of medical treatments and there are risks involved.
Yeah. And just for clarity's sake, this process, this procedure of Botox would be around the facial area and the neck. Does it stop there? Are there other body parts that can receive this kind of treatment as well?
So we work head to toe from hair, enhancing hair growth using platelet-rich fibrin. The face, obviously, that's where we'd use things like botulinum toxin, fillers, machines. But again, into the body, we more and more are seeing a lot of patients coming in seeking things like platelet-rich fibrin fillers, which we do into the breasts. We do the P shots and the V shots. We'll get into that later. We work on stretch marks, skin tightening, and like I say, all the way down. But we also have physiotherapists who work in our building, and with them, we use the botulinum toxin to target stubborn trigger points that are possibly causing pain or discomfort in patients' lives. And that can
Mm.
be anywhere in the body as well.
Interesting. Another thing that's been circulating among very many girlies is Ozempic. Yes, everybody wants to go on Ozempic. Everyone and their best friend and potentially their dog are looking to try this new product out. And for the most part, what we've seen in a spread of a month or to 2 months, somebody would go from quite the size to an eight, a six, you know. And it's almost shocking to the brain. Is that healthy? Is it not? What's happening in the body?
So we discourage the use of products like that
Mhm.
for, the uses that they were not intended for. They were used, created, studied for diabetics who needed to control their weight, and for them it's very beneficial. But to use it as a substitute for exercise and general diet discipline is a very bad idea. You must remember, when you lose weight using these products, you lose bone, muscle, and fat. So your face will start to look very aged very quickly. You will do yourself a disservice when it comes to your future. For a woman, what we would want is for you to be in the gym, lifting heavy weights, adding density to your bones, so that when you reach menopause, you start that clock and you start to diminish your bone, but you don't ever reach fractures before you die. And so you're undoing that process. And in the same way, the fastest way to create um, an engine in your body that burns your fat as fuel is to create more muscle. And so the more muscle you have, the faster you'll lose your weight and your fat. And so your scale may not move at all, but the shape of your body will change. And we all know that's really what we're after. Nobody cares what the number is on the scale. What we care about is how we look and whether we jiggle in the right places or not. And so we want people to go to gym, and we want them to push those weights and really leave the medication for the people who need the medication, because side effects are real. People go blind, and there's a lot of yes, that's one of the side effects. There's a lawsuit in America against one of the manufacturers from the people who went blind from using the medication.
Wow. Okay. All right. So it's off to the gym for the
Yes.
rest of us girlies who haven't tried. Let's talk about the saying, dress the way you want to be addressed. It's now morphed into look like the way you want to be treated, right? And the association of elegance, money, if you will, is that of an individual who looks youthful, right? And in all aspects, be it you are the desired size of the season, be it your skin is glowing, all these things sort of contributing to, and I will say negatively, and you're allowed to correct me, negatively to the ordinary Shayla who's on the ground, who perhaps doesn't have that much money or doesn't have access to procedures that will allow her to look that way. What's your take on that debate? Because I do see it influencing younger and younger individuals.
So I hope I remember everything I wanted to say while you were talking, but it's an interesting topic and one that I actually love. I call it the psychology of aesthetics, and I actually put up a few videos that I saved on my Instagram. I don't know if people will still find them now. I called it the psychology of aesthetics. And one of the best books I've ever read about this is one called Survival of the Prettiest. And what it did is it took all of the studies in the world that were existing at that time and brought them all together. So sometimes the things that we take out of that book may seem a little bit contentious, but they all have scientific backing, and it's using studies that have proven these theories. So when you look at it, it's one of the interesting things. If I had to ask you, if you thought being attractive had a benefit in the workplace, how much money, if you had to break it down and simplify it, how much money would you say an attractive person would earn versus somebody deemed unattractive, roughly speaking?
Okay, so I'm going to give you percentage,
Give me a percentage.
right? Against one against. So if the unattractive is at 50%, the attractive is at 75, 80% is
So
my
you're not
gauge.
too wrong, actually, I think, because it's actually the equivalent of an additional master's degree. So if you didn't have a master's degree, you would add one on. If you had one, you'd add two on. If you had two, you'd add three on. And so this is the fact. And the reason is not as unfair as you would think for two reasons. Number one, people listen to good-looking people. And so if you had to try and sell a house, sell cars, sell anything, you would be able to sell more, you would earn your company more money, you would earn more commission, and so it would not be necessarily based on just the way somebody thought you looked, but yes, it is based on the way that you look. So it gives you a big advantage. Now in human history is the best time to be alive because you can do something about it. You know, your grandmother, your even possibly your mother, your grandmother, mother, they didn't have these opportunities that we have that we can use to make a difference. You know, when I noticed my hair was starting to thin, I did a DNA test. I started using products. I used platelet-rich fibrin in my hair, and I used hair fillers, and I used growth factor solutions over time, and I maintained my hair and I kept my hair. And so this is amazing for me because we can change the way that we look and the way that the world perceives us in a way that no one could before. So that playing field is actually becoming more and more level. Whereas before, you know, the good-looking people had that advantage, and well, the rest of us just kind of looked at them and said, well, how nice for them. But now, this is why I'm saying we actually live in the most fair time that we could have actually lived.
So, with that being said, for somebody who is working their way towards affording looking good, what are some of the tips that you give them that they can practice now, tangibly at this stage?
You know, this is one of the great misconceptions of aesthetics as well, is that it's expensive. Now, if you had to look at the why do people think it's expensive? It's because if you had to look at our pages, look at our Instagram, at our website, you don't get to see any of the prices. And that's because it's not legal for us to advertise prices. It's not that it's the same as, you know, buying a sports car, and that's why we put POA. It's more that we're not allowed to advertise the prices. But if you had to go to buy some good skincare products in the shops, that is the equivalent of what someone would spend. So our average patient spends about 4,000 Rand on a visit, and that's not a bad amount to spend on every 2 months or so. So that's kind of the ballparks that people look at. Obviously, as we go, there can be more.
The voice there of Dr. Reza Mia joining us and speaking to the realities of aesthetic medicine. If you were thinking, listen, a nip, a tuck, a trim, a slim down, if that's you and you're saying, I don't know if I'm comfortable going this route, I think it's extremely expensive. I do think that it is straying me away from what I'm supposed to find beautiful. The practitioners in this particular field actually assess your state of being. They gauge you and where your headspace is at. And I think I truly appreciate that as well. So if you're trying to do that, listen, all I'm saying is give yourself a moment to think about it. Is this about edifying or is this about changing? Because what I currently have is not the one. Remember, trends and people's desires and what people find attractive is fleeting. But this body you have, it's the only one you get. Let me not guilt trip you. It is 8 minutes after 11 p.m. Central African time. We take a quick breather. And when we get back, we look at the power and the art of journaling.